Hello everyone and welcome back to Muddy Mint. Today we're going to be making oatmeal and aloe. Now this is a really nice unscented bar of soap, and we're going to be talking a little bit about why you should be including unscented bars in your product line, at least one option for people. In addition to that, it has a ton of oatmeal in it. It has avocado butter. It's actually the same recipe as our aloe and spearmint soap, which we made a few days ago, but it's the unscented version of that soap. And this soap has such an amazing feel and lather, and it's just a really great unscented bar. So let's get right to it. All right, so over here I have my oils. We prep these oils in advance, and there is avocado butter in here, which is kind of the star ingredient. We also have a bunch of colloidal oatmeal. Now, colloidal oatmeal is different than just regular oatmeal. It's very, very finely ground, almost like a flour. It makes for a really nice feel in the soap, but also on your skin. And then we have aloe vera juice. And if you haven't seen our video on how to add liquids to your soaps, then definitely check that out. But this is an alternative liquid. So we could be adding anything here. It could be goat milk, it could be carrot juice, it could be anything. It's the exact same process. Today we're doing aloe vera juice, and then here is our 50-50 lye water solution. Now, the first thing I do before I start making soap is check the temperatures. And I think my lye is a little bit cool, so this is a good opportunity to show you guys how I warm it up. All right, our oils are at 92 degrees Fahrenheit, which is perfect. We're going to be adding a few more ingredients to the soap. We're going to have aloe vera and oatmeal, obviously, so that's going to cool it down a little bit. Our lye water is a little bit cool. It's at 83, 84 degrees Fahrenheit. And honestly, I would probably just make soap at this temperature because that's plenty warm. I feel like as long as it's over 80 degrees, then you're pretty much good to go. And we used to actually make our soap with room temperature 50-50 lye water all the time. And it was totally fine for a long time. And then one winter, it was particularly cold. The studio is not very warm. It doesn't stay very warm. It is heated a little bit, but not too much. And so what happened that year is that we started to have trouble with our soap making. Our cooler lye combined with our high butter soaps was causing the butters to solidify. So it was actually really problematic. And that's why we have started warming up our lye water now. And I'll show you how we do that. Again, I don't actually need to do it for this particular batch, but I'll just show you because I get this question a lot, actually. Let me grab a couple things. Okay, so we have these buckets. We have stacks and stacks of buckets like this because they're so handy in the soap studio. And what I would do to warm up my lye water is to go boil some water, which I usually do in my kitchen since we don't have any water in here. You could also use really hot water if your water gets very hot. And then you pour out the lye water solution that you need for your soap. So not the entire batch of lye water that you've made, but the amount that you are using for your particular batch. And I would stick it right in here into the hot water bath. And so you're bringing this up to temperature slowly, and I would stir it and check the temperature regularly. Now, with boiling water, this actually comes up to temperature really fast, probably about 2 minutes. So you definitely want to keep an eye on it because otherwise it might end up too hot. And then you simply take it out when it's ready and you're good to go. Another technique, which is what I'm going to do today, is to actually add water to your lye water solution. And what this does is it reactivates the lye and actually warms up your entire solution. So if you're lazy like me or you don't have any water nearby, you can use this technique to warm up your lye water solution. But you do want to take this into account with your water to lye ratio. So right now I'm using a 2-to-1 water to lye ratio. I have 2 parts water, 1 part lye. This is 1-to-1, and this is my other 1 part liquid. If I'm adding extra water, I've got some distilled water in here, then I'm adding more water to my recipe. Now, this might not be an issue for you. It's not an issue for me because I'm using a 2-to-1, so this is just going to increase it maybe to 2.1-to-1, which is really not that big a deal as far as I'm concerned. You might be wondering why I'm not adding the aloe vera in here. I could do that, but I really don't love putting other liquids in with my lye water. If this was goat milk, for instance, I definitely wouldn't do that. I might be inclined to do it with the aloe vera, but I prefer to add distilled water. And so therefore, you're adding more water to your entire batch. So just something to keep in mind. Now, if you're not adding an additional liquid, then I would just take the water that you have in here as your additional liquid and put a tiny bit in here. It will warm it up pretty quickly, so I'm just going to do an ounce of water and see what temperature I get. I would definitely measure how much you're adding so that you know how much to add next time. But let's keep an eye on the temperature and you'll see how it warms up. So we're at 84 right now. Like I said, this is plenty warm to make soap, but let me add an ounce of water, which isn't really very much at all. Okay, so that's exactly 1 ounce of distilled water. And I can tell that this is reactivating. I'm at 92 right now. So we went from 84 to 92 with just 1 ounce. Super easy way to warm up your lye water. Again, make sure you're taking that extra water amount into consideration for your recipe. All right, so now we're good to go. Okay, so I'm just going to get right to it. We are going to talk about why it's a good idea to add unscented soap to your product line while we make this soap. First, I'm going to add the aloe vera in here. And I'm adding it directly to my oils. I'm going to add my colloidal oatmeal directly in here too. What I like about doing, adding ingredients directly to my oils rather than adding them at trace is that everything stays, you can mix everything properly is what I'm trying to say. Right now my oatmeal is kind of lumpy, which I don't love, but once I mix it in here really thoroughly, it's going to be great. So as a soap maker, there are a lot of benefits to making an unscented bar of soap for you and for your customers. So for your customers, it gives people an option who are far more sensitive to scents, for example. And a lot of people are looking for something that's going to be really good for sensitive skin, for babies, for, the face, for delicate areas of the skin. And so it's just really nice to have that option available for people. And sometimes people order it and it turns out that they love unscented bars and they didn't even realize that they love unscented bars. And this particular bar is so nice and creamy and just has a really good lather and feel, I find. And so it really is one of those bars that people end up loving and ordering over and over again. So I like to throw unscented bars in as samples for people because a lot of people might not necessarily purchase them, but then they end up realizing that they really like them. The other reason they're so great, especially for a larger production space, is that if something is unscented, it has a longer shelf life. So the scent isn't going to fade, the essential oils aren't going to fade. If you're making fragrance oil soaps, this isn't really an issue, but if you're making essential oil soaps, having something on the shelf that can last longer is really nice. And the unscented bars actually, I think, get better with time. They just get harder. The lather gets better over time. Like I had somebody once ask me what this soap was that she had bought from me like 2 years ago. And it turned out, she sent me a picture and I recognized it as our minimalist soap. And she said it was the best lather she had ever found on any soap. And it was an unscented bar, so there was no problems with the soap, losing its scent over time. And it just kept getting better and better. So in other words, if you have too much of an unscented soap on hand, like it's not selling as well as some of the other bars, it's okay because it can sit a little bit longer. So I highly recommend having, I would say just one unscented bar as an option in your product line. And it doesn't have to be a boring unscented bar. I think a lot of people equate unscented with kind of boring. You could have one that has pink clay and roses on top, and it could be unscented. It could be, our minimalist soap is meant to be very minimalist with minimal ingredients, which appeals to a lot of people. This one is really high in oatmeal, which a lot of people really like with sensitive skin. And it has this pretty pop of color, which is from the safflower petals on top. So you can make a beautiful unscented bar that people want to buy, even though it's an unscented soap. So just something to keep in mind. The other thing is that when you're making unscented soap, you definitely want to make sure that you're keeping it separate from your other bars. Obviously, you want to cure it on a tray that doesn't have any other scent, on it, or the freezer paper that's underneath shouldn't be carrying any scent. But also you want to be conscious of using a mold that doesn't have too much scent. We actually used to use these molds. We switched to slab molds, which helped a lot with our unscented soaps, but these molds that have this liner in here, the liner tends to stay on the scent. And so this particular batch of soap I'm making now, I'm using a liner that I previously made orange and bergamot with because it's a very mildly scented soap. I found that if we make a soap that has lavender, for instance, in here, and then make our unscented bar immediately after, that people actually contacted us and complained that our unscented bar wasn't really unscented because it smelled like lavender. So that's definitely something that you want to think about, because people who are buying unscented soap really want it to be unscented. They don't want some extra fragrance in there that ends up bothering them, especially something like lavender, because some people are sensitive to lavender or they don't love the smell. So I try to make the unscented soaps in molds that either are reserved only for unscented soaps, or after I have made a soap that is really mild in scent, like orange and bergamot, which has very light citrus scent, and so it doesn't tend to transfer over to this soap. All right. Hopefully I've convinced you to try making some unscented soaps. I personally love unscented bars of soap. I don't know why. It's just kind of, once the scent isn't there, you're not left thinking about how the bar smells. It's more how it feels. And so you're more in tune with, the experience. I don't know if that makes sense, but all right, let's get making. We're going to add our lye water to our oils. Everything's already in here. This is a super simple, straightforward soap, which is another great thing about unscented soaps. All right, that looks pretty good. Unscented soaps, by the way, do sometimes have kind of an odd smell when you cut them. I have had people complain about that. And, when there's no other scent to mask the scent of the soap, you notice it more. And particularly ones with oatmeal. Somehow oatmeal, especially in this sort of larger amount or quantity, just does not smell great when you cut it. So you can expect to smell that when you cut, but don't worry, that completely goes away. Your soap is going to smell amazing. Just have a really nice soapy, natural soap smell. All right, this batter looks great. Let's grab our molds. Okay. This recipe, by the way, is available on our website. It's under aloe and spearmint. So aloe and spearmint is kind of a 2-for-1 recipe. They both use the same base, so it's this avocado butter base, which is really, really lovely. And There's cocoa butter in here too, by the way. So it's got a really nice base recipe, but then you also have this unscented soap and you get the aloe and spearmint recipe as well, which is the spearmint soap. We made that one a few days ago and recorded a video, so that should be up on YouTube when you watch this video. I really love the color of this soap. It's basically looks like oatmeal, which is exactly what you want for an oatmeal soap. Since this is such a simple soap, we kind of make a dramatic texture on top, and I add these safflower petals, which look beautiful on top of here. All right, we're gonna give this a minute to thicken up because this texture is quite dramatic, so I want this to be quite thick when I make it. And I'll be back in just a minute to do the top texture and add these beautiful safflower petals. All right, so that was probably only a minute or two actually, and it's already pretty thick. So I just basically push with a spoon across about halfway. And this gets nice and thick after a few minutes, even though it's actually pretty thin batter when I first make it. One of the reasons I chose this texture way back when is because it was such a thin batter when I first poured it. And what I found is after I made this first sweep across, and normally I do one the other way as well, I noticed that the space that was left was so smooth and flat, which didn't happen a lot to me at the time because I would typically make my batter too thick, which as you do as a beginner. This is a really old soap, by the way. I've been making it for a long, long time. And so after I did that first pass, I was like, wow, that looks so cool with it so flat on the one side and then the texture. And then for whatever reason, instead of putting the safflower petals on the flat part, I guess because I wanted to show that part because I thought it was so cool, I ended up putting them here. And every time I make the soap, I'm like, oh, that was an interesting choice. But we've been selling this soap for a long time, and this is what the picture looks like. So I've always made it exactly the same way. And you can see that those safflower petals just really add, I don't know, just a little more pizzazz to an otherwise pretty simple bar. All right. A lot of people ask me if we cover our soaps or anything like that, and we do not. We just leave them exactly like this. I like to space them apart a little bit so that there's airflow around the soap. And we just let them do their thing, whether they're, you know, this soap or goat milk soap or anything. We don't ever cover our soaps. I used to do that, but honestly, it got a little bit tiring and it's a lot of work. And when you're making a lot of soap like we were making, it's just not really feasible to cover all of your soaps unless you have slabs that actually have covers on them. And then by all means do it. But we found that we never really needed to, and it works out great. Sometimes you get a little bit of ash, but I personally kind of like it. So anyway, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you haven't seen our aloe and spearmint video, definitely check that out next. It's the same recipe as this, but it just has a scent and a color. And so it's just fun to see how the same base recipe can produce such different results. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye.